In the heart of the wild savannah lives a giraffe unlike any other. His name is Gary, known far and wide as Gary the grinning giraffe. You see, Gary isn't just any giraffe. He's always grinning, always spreading cheer, making the savannah a happier place. Imagine, if you will, a tall, majestic creature, his long neck reaching towards the sky, covered in a tapestry of spots. That's our Gary. He's not just about his grin, though. Oh no. Gary is a friend to all. He chats with the chattering monkeys, plays with the playful lions, and even hums along with the melodious birds. Gary has a curious mind, too. He's always solving puzzles, using his long neck to reach for clues in the highest treetops. And did I mention, he's the life of the party? His knack for making everyone laugh is legendary. Gary, the grinning giraffe, is the happiest creature you'll ever meet. One sunny morning, Gary woke up to a strange silence in the savannah. Unlike the usual symphony of nature, everything was eerily quiet. The usually chatty birds sat silently on their branches, and the usually playful monkeys kept to themselves. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath, as if it too was caught up in the unusual calm. Gary, always the life of the savannah with his sunny grin, was puzzled. He wasn't used to this silence. In fact, he thrived on the lively chatter and cheerful banter of his friends. So he decided to do what he did best: spread joy and cheer. He trotted around the savannah, flashing his famous grin and trying to engage his friends. But the zebras only flicked their ears, the elephants merely rumbled, and the lions continued to doze. No one was in the mood for laughter, it seemed, and Gary's grinning antics did not have their usual effect. Now, if there was one thing Gary could not stand, it was seeing his friends upset. He knew something was amiss. He just couldn't put his hoof on it, and it definitely wasn't for lack of trying. He spoke to the hippos in the watering hole. He tried to tickle the ostriches. He even attempted to make the crocodiles laugh with his funniest jokes, but nothing seemed to work. The savannah remained gloomy, and the animals unusually quiet. This was not the vibrant home Gary knew and loved. It was as if a blanket of sadness had descended upon the savannah and taken away all the laughter. But Gary was not one to give up easily. He was determined to find out what was wrong and fix it. He was, after all, Gary the grinning giraffe, the one who always brought the sunshine back, no matter how cloudy the day. Determined, Gary set out to bring back laughter to his beloved savannah. With a brave heart and a hopeful grin, he embarked on his mission. Little did he know that he was about to embark on an adventure that would change his life forever. Gary, with his long neck and keen eyes, began his investigation. As he ambled through the savannah with the sun high in the sky, he couldn't help but notice the unusual silence. Where were the familiar sounds of the jungle? The babbling brook, the chirping birds, the rustling leaves? They were all missing. Gary, being the tallest animal, could see far and wide. His eyes darted around as he noticed the drooping leaves and the wilting flowers. But most importantly, he saw the animals, his friends, looking glum and upset. There was a sense of unease in the air, and Gary couldn't ignore it any longer. He decided to approach his friend, Benny the baboon, who was sitting morosely on a tree branch. Benny explained, with a heavy heart, that the river had dried up. There was no water to drink, and all the animals were suffering. The severity of the problem struck Gary like a bolt of lightning. Water, the essence of life, was missing in their home. The animals were thirsty, the plants were wilting, and the once vibrant jungle was now dull and quiet. But what startled Gary the most was the fear in Benny's eyes, a fear shared by all the animals. Their home was in danger, and they were helpless. Gary could see the urgency of the situation, but he was not one to lose hope. With his heart pounding and his mind racing, Gary thought about the problem. He knew he had to do something. There was no room for despair, only action. He had to come up with a plan, and he had to do it fast. The lives of his friends were at stake, and he couldn't let them down. With a hopeful grin, Gary knew he had to find a solution, and he would. His optimism was infectious, and even in the face of adversity, he managed to instill a sense of hope in the other animals. This was the power of Gary, the grinning giraffe. His smile was not just a grin, it was a beacon of hope, a promise of better days to come. Gary, always a thinker, had a brilliant idea. Our grinning friend Gary the giraffe was not one to be defeated by a problem, especially not one as big as this. As he looked up at the sky, he realized that he had something many others didn't. He had height, and a lot of it. His long neck could reach up higher than any of the other animals in the savannah. And so, a clever plan began to form in his mind. Gary decided that he would use his height to his advantage. He thought, what if I could reach up to the clouds and squeeze out the rain? Now I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a pretty wild idea. But Gary, being Gary, had a knack for making the most outlandish ideas seem possible. He went around sharing his plan with the other animals. Imagine, he'd say, me reaching up to the clouds and coaxing them to give us rain. The animals listened, some with skepticism, others with curiosity. But the more Gary spoke, the more they found themselves believing in his plan. There was something about his infectious enthusiasm, his unwavering belief, that made them want to believe too. Gary laid out his plan in detail. He would need to find the highest hill, stretch his neck to its fullest extent, and perhaps, just perhaps, he would be able to touch a cloud. He would then gently squeeze the cloud, and voila! Rain would pour down upon the parched land. The animals, one by one, began to rally behind Gary. They offered their help and support. Even the skeptical ones couldn't help but be swayed by Gary's passion and determination. They saw in his grinning face a glimmer of hope, a possibility of change. And so, with the support of his friends and his clever plan in mind, Gary was ready to take on this daring mission. His grin widened, his eyes sparkled with anticipation. He was ready to make a difference, ready to change things for the better. With a confident grin, Gary began his daring mission. With the support of his friends, Gary reached for the sky. Just as he'd planned, Gary the grinning giraffe found himself high above the savannah, surrounded by fluffy clouds. With all his might, he stretched his long neck, reaching for the nearest cloud. His friends watched from below, their eyes wide with anticipation. Then, with a gentle squeeze, something magical happened. A drop of water fell from the cloud, followed by another and another. Suddenly, it was raining on the parched savannah. The animals below broke into cheers as the rain fell upon them. Elephants trumpeted, monkeys hopped about, and birds sang songs of joy. The savannah, which had been wilting under the harsh sun, now danced with life. Every blade of grass, every leaf, every flower seemed to be smiling in gratitude. Gary watched this all from above, his grin wider than ever. But it wasn't just because he'd managed to make it rain. No, Gary was grinning because he saw his friends happy and joyful again. He saw the savannah, their home, lively and vibrant once more. He saw the problem that had worried them all finally solved. And as he descended back to the ground, the animals gathered around him, their eyes shining with gratitude. They thanked him, praised him, and celebrated him. But for Gary, the greatest reward was seeing the joy in their eyes, the relief in their smiles. He knew then that he'd done something truly special. The sun set that day on a savannah that was no longer parched and dry, but lively and full of life. The animals slept peacefully that night, their worries washed away by the rain. And at the heart of it all was Gary, our grinning hero, his grin lighting up the savannah even in the moonlight. And so, Gary the grinning giraffe saved the day, his grin lighting up the savannah once more. As the sun set, the savannah was alive with laughter and cheer. Gary the grinning giraffe had given us all a reason to grin ear to ear. His adventure had taught us some valuable lessons. The first, to always stay optimistic even when the clouds are dark and the wind is strong. It's during these times, Gary showed us, that we need to keep our heads high just like a giraffe. The second lesson is about problem solving. Gary didn't just stand tall, he thought tall too. He used his clever mind to come up with a plan, proving that even the biggest problem can be solved with a bit of thought and creativity. The third lesson, the joy of helping others. When the savannah was in need, Gary didn't hesitate to lend a hoof. Seeing the joy his actions brought to others, well, that was the biggest grin of all. Remember, no matter how big the problem, there's always a reason to keep grinning. Just like Gary, our beloved grinning giraffe.